Morning light streamed through the antique stained glass windows of the Whitmore mansion, projecting colorful reflections onto the impeccable marble floor. Lisa held the cloth with her hands shaking, but it wasn't from the cold. It was the weight of silence. The hallway smelled of expensive furniture wax and loneliness. The only sound was the whisper of the duster brushing the baseboards and the slight creaking of the wheels of Oliver's chair, motionless near the window. No one noticed her, but she saw everything. Every detail of that house spoke of a suffocated pain, a broken boy and an absent father behind thick walls and millionaire contracts. There, in that setting of oppressive luxury, lived a child who had not spoken for 2 years, and a woman who only spoke when it was necessary. Lisa, the cleaner, invisible but alive. Behind the shabby uniform, there was a quiet force, because she knew how to recognize in a child's eyes the same emptiness that she saw in her own mirrors. How many women have gone through this and been silent? How many were seen only as the hand that cleanses and never as the heart that heals? This is the story of a cleaning lady who dared to dance where there was only pain. And what happened next, no one could ever imagine. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives don't scream, they whisper. It was on a silent afternoon, when the golden light invaded the main room of the mansion, that everything changed. The sound of a childish laugh, which had not echoed for more than 2 years, crossed the halls like a miracle. Henry Whitmore, a man accustomed to the silence of mourning and the coldness of contracts, came into the house and heard something impossible. As he turned the corner of the hall, what he saw paralyzed him. Lisa, the immigrant cleaner, danced with her son in the wheelchair, spinning gently with him to the sound of a salsa that filled the air with color. Oliver, the boy who did not smile, laughed with his eyes closed, given over to joy as if he had rediscovered life. And in that instant, Henry felt everything: love, fear, anger, blame. But it did not do what everyone expected, and that's why you need to hear every bit of that story. If you've ever felt that no one saw your worth, that your presence was a detail in a hurried world, then this story is for you. And if at any time, while listening, your heart touches Lisa's, leave your like and subscribe, not out of obligation, but as someone who holds someone's hand and says, "I saw it, I'm here with you." Water from the communal shower dripped onto the tin ceiling like a stubborn tear, while Lisa wiped the small sink in the apartment. The wall clock read 4:37 in the morning, but she had already been up for half an hour. The city still slept when she put on her worn-out sneakers and tied her hair up with the same faded elastic as always. The cleaning uniform hanging from the kitchen chair smelled of cheap soap and dry sweat, a mixture she no longer noticed. She lived alone upstairs in a Mexican grocery store in North Charleston, where the smell of tortillas and burning oil was part of everyday breakfast. Lisa was one of those women who go unnoticed on the sidewalks, but who carry more weight on their shoulders than many people who parade in luxury cars. He didn't complain. I had already learned that a woman who complains loses. What a woman who shows sadness scares. What a poor foreign woman without a husband needs to smile without seeming offered and be silent without seeming submissive. The cracked cell phone rang with a notification. A photo of her daughters sent by her grandmother, straight from Texas. Clara and Mariana, 10 and 12 years old, dressed in simple clothes but with bright eyes. The youngest wore an orthosis on her left leg, a remnant of the cerebral palsy that had accompanied her since she was 2 years old. Lisa held her phone as if holding her heart out of her chest. The longing hurt like a dry twinge in the stomach, but there was no time to feel it. He took a deep breath, put his phone away, laced up his sneakers, and left in silence. The journey to the Whitmore mansion took almost an hour in 2 buses. In the first, it was just the noise of the city waking up. In the second, the girls from the hospital, the boys from the construction site, and a lady with the smell of lavender who sold hand-embroidered dish towels. Lisa always sat at the same window. I watched the mansions slowly emerge, like castles in a land that seemed to have no room for those who cleaned their windows. The Whitmore mansion was so large that it had a name, the Elms. Standing in front of that wrought-iron gate was like entering another world, a world where silence was polished, cutlery was silver, and children didn't run around, they just existed, with empty eyes and expensive suits. Henry Whitmore, the owner of the house, was a reserved man, with firm steps and measured words, a widower with discreet dark circles under his eyes and a suit that was always well aligned. Lisa could only see him from afar. It passed through it, like wind passes through glass, present but invisible. His job was to clean, silently, bathrooms that looked like magazine rooms, oriental rugs that were worth more than his annual salary. One day, while scrubbing the baseboard of the office, he caught a glimpse of a black and white photograph on the shelf. Henry, with a blonde woman and a boy in his arms. The same boy who today lived mute, motionless, with his eyes lost in the roof of the house. Oliver. The first time she saw him was in the garden. He was in a wheelchair, staring at some point in the sky. The nurse was reading a book, distracted. Lisa stopped, bucket in hand. The sunlight hit the boy's face, revealing an absent look, so similar to the one she had seen so many times in Clara. It was the same emptiness of those who feel but don't know how to show it, the same silence that screams. That afternoon, as she cleared the steps of the interior stairs, Lisa thought of Clara. She thought about the nights when her daughter cried for no apparent reason. I thought of the doctors, saying that maybe she would never speak, never walk properly. And she thought about how, despite everything, she just had to turn on a soft song, sing a childhood song, and Clara would smile. Even with a stiff leg, even with a locked speech, Lisa began to observe Oliver, the way his body reacted to light, how the eyes moved when someone spoke louder, how he widened his eyelids when one of the dogs in the house barked. She perceived what no one saw, because I had already lived through that. I'd already held a child in my arms without knowing if it would ever answer back. She saw Oliver, and at that moment, inside his chest, something hurt differently. It wasn't just missing her daughters. It was the recognition of an old pain which lived hidden in the corners of the soul, a pain that many mothers know, seeing a child forgotten by the world just because he cannot speak. If you've ever felt that silent pain of seeing someone you love being ignored, of wanting to scream for justice even without words, write here in the comments, I believe, I've lived it, it touched me. What strength, it's true. Because there are stories that only those who live it understand. That night, when she returned home, Lisa sat on the edge of the bed, took off her sneakers calmly, and cried softly. Not because of fatigue, but because of the courage I was building up inside my chest, by the desire to not only clean that house, but maybe, just maybe, touch that soul that everyone treated as absent. But she still didn't know the size of the storm that would come when someone decided to see what she was trying to heal in secret. And when that storm came, she would have to choose between being silent or fight. The main corridor of the mansion was as long as a tunnel of silence. Persian rugs muffled the footsteps, and the gilded pictures on the walls seemed to observe more than decorate. Oliver, the ghost boy, as some caregivers called him when they thought no one heard, was sitting in his wheelchair near the window of the east room, staring into space. It was always like this, 7 years old and the weight of a grief that seemed to not fit even in adulthood. His eyes were clear but opaque, the kind of look that finds no answer in any therapy. Lisa wiped the cloth on the floor carefully so as not to scare him, but always with her eyes on him. I noticed the smallest things. The way he stretched out his left foot when he heard a door slam, how he blinked more when they vacuumed too close, how his jaw trembled a little when someone shouted in another room. He was too sensitive to the world around him, but no one there seemed to notice. The nurses did their work mechanically. They took blood pressure, gave him vitamins, took him to physical therapy, came back with him and left him there, as if he were part of the expensive furniture. The therapists came with folders, headphones, technological toys, but they always left frustrated. "He doesn't want to communicate," they said. "He doesn't react." But Lisa thought differently. What if he just didn't want to react with those who didn't speak from the heart? That late afternoon, the Charleston sky was orange, with dense clouds announcing heavy rain. Lisa was cleaning the railing of the stairs when she heard a dry knock. It was Oliver's toy falling to the floor, an old teddy bear which seemed to have been loved one day, but now only rested on his lap as an ornament. She stopped what she was doing, looked, no caregiver around. He approached slowly, picked up the bear and crouched down. For the first time, the two were at the same height. She held out the teddy bear to him and, in a low voice, said, "I know that look, you know. My daughter also looked like that when the world made too much noise, but do you know what made her come back to me? A story." She sat on the carpet, cross-legged, the floor cloth still in her hand. "It was about a boy named Michael, who flew on a magic carpet made of old cloth and discovered hidden kingdoms." Oliver didn't move, but his eyes. For the first time, they were not at the window, they were in it. Lisa felt her breath heavy. Something there had broken, or if it opens. She continued the story, inventing on the spot, as she did with her daughters. He spoke of mountains made of sweet bread, of dragons that liked to dance, and of forests where the wind told secrets. And in the middle of a sentence he saw it. Oliver's neck turned, slow, painful, but it did, and his eyes found her, with life. At that moment she forgot that she was a cleaner. He forgot that that house was not his, that that boy was not hers, because what existed between the two was something that no uniform, no wall, no salary could contain. It was the kind of connection that is only born between broken souls who recognize each other in the dark. She didn't say anything, neither did he. But the silence between them was no longer death, it was one of discovery. From afar, through the window, the rain began to fall, thick, hard, washing the world outside. But inside, for the first time in 2 years, someone could see Oliver for real. And if anyone saw him, who else could be starting to notice? The sound of the vacuum cleaner barely disguised the emptiness that surrounded the Whitmore house. Lisa, with the cloth folded over her shoulder and the improvised headset with duct tape, swept the rooms as if she didn't want to disturb the weather. In the wide corridors and silent furniture, music was the only piece of the world that still belonged to him. She used to listen quietly, just to deceive the longing for her daughters. One day, unintentionally, the volume escaped louder than normal. It was an old salsa, one of those that make the body sway even before the thought. She realized it too late. The nurse was not around. Oliver, as always, was by the window. But then, for a split second, he blinked. A quick blink, almost imperceptible. But for those who live by observing silences, it was like a scream. Lisa froze, lowered the sound guiltily, pretended not to notice, but his heart raced. Something there moved. The next day he returned with the same song, a little bit higher. He pretended to clean the floor in the hallway while he watched discreetly. Oliver was in the same place. But this time, when the chorus began, he moved his shoulders slightly, an almost involuntary gesture, a rhythm coming from within. As if, for the first time in 2 years, the body remembered what joy was. Lisa bit her lips to contain her excitement. She continued dancing with the cloth, as if it were part of the cleaning. He passed the cloth, turned a little, smiled discreetly at the floor. From time to time, he glanced at it, and he accompanied. His gaze was no longer lost. It was in it. On the 3rd day, it was different. Lisa took a deep breath before entering the room. She had in her pocket a small portable speaker, one of those cheap ones, a gift from a colleague at church. He turned on the same salsa, short at first, then a little higher. Oliver was more upright in his chair. Her feet did not move, but her arms began to slide lightly over the supports. Lisa walked up to him with an almost holy calm, knelt in front of him and held out her hands. He looked, not afraid, but curiously. She extended her fingers slowly, and he, with a slowness that made time stop, stretched his. They touched each other. She held those small, cold hands as if holding a secret of the world, and he began to gently rock them to the rhythm of the music. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, without saying anything, just movement, only presence. Oliver's eyes closed for a moment. A slight, almost ghostly smile was drawn on the corner of his mouth. Lisa held her tears in her throat. It was happening. He was coming back. There, amid expensive furniture and indifferent walls, a cleaning lady and a broken boy danced. It was a shy, restrained, but real dance. He had no technique, no beauty. He had a soul. He had life. It was the first human touch he had accepted in years. Each day, Lisa came back with a new song. He tested rhythms. From time to time, a soft bachata. Others, a ballad in Spanish, but it was always the ancient salsa that made the miracle happen. Oliver began to sway his shoulders on his own. Then, the neck. And once he laughed. Short, but he laughed. Lisa didn't talk to anyone about it. I knew that it only took one misplaced comment to lose everything. She was just a cleaning lady. And cleaners don't dance with the boss's children. But something inside her said that it was right. That boy needed to dance. That his body needed to relearn its way back to the world. And she was willing to show it. What she didn't know is that someone was about to see them. And that someone would not react as she expected. Because when a silent truth begins to blossom inside a cold house, either it heals everything, or it destroys what is left. The wheels of Henry Whitmore's suitcase cut through the marble floor of the entrance, as if laughing back at him. The driver barely had time to open the door. He preferred to enter alone, in an impulse that even he could not explain. Maybe it was tiredness. Maybe it was that weird feeling that had accompanied him since Atlanta, as if something out of his control was about to happen. The old clock on the wall read 5:42 p.m. The house was quiet, too quiet. But then he listened. At first, he thought it was the wind hitting some window. Later, he believed he had mistaken it for television sound. But it wasn't that. Era, laughter, child's laughter. A light, high-pitched sound that echoed down the spiral staircase and pierced his chest like a forgotten whisper. For a second, Henry paused in the middle of the hall and closed his eyes. I hadn't heard that sound for 2 years, since the damn accident on I-26, since he buried his wife and lost his son without needing a coffin. The sound followed. Quick, restrained steps. He crossed the corridor and approached the main room. And when he stopped at the door, the scene before him took the air out of his lungs. In the center of the Persian carpet, Oliver spun smoothly in his wheelchair. On the backrest, a colorful balloon fluttered attached by an improvised wire. In front of him, dancing with restrained movements, almost playing with the floor, was Lisa, the cleaning lady, twirling with the cloth in his hands, smiling in a way that had not been seen in that house since before the tragedy. And Oliver laughed. He laughed out loud with his eyes closed, his shoulders shaking, his hands vibrating in the air as if flying. Henry stood still, the chest tightened, the heart beating strongly. A part of him wanted to cry. I didn't know what to do. It was his son, their only child, and he was laughing, but not with him, with a stranger, a cleaning lady, an employee, a woman he barely knew, dancing there without permission, without protocol, without the slightest right. Emotion and control fought within him, and control won. "What's going on here?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Lisa stopped at the same moment, his body frozen, his eyes wide. The cloth fell from his hands like a confession. The balloon fluttered. Oliver stopped laughing. His hands recoiled. The look faded. It was as if someone had turned off the light inside him. Henry entered the room with stiff steps. He looked at Lisa with a mixture of anger and confusion. "This is a house, not a circus," he growled. "You're a cleaner, not a nanny, not a therapist. Who allowed you to touch it like that?" Lisa lowered her eyes. The voice did not come out. Oliver pulled back his chair slightly, with a movement that looked more like fear. The music was still playing softly, coming from the box in the corner of the room. "Turn it off!" Henry shouted, and the box was kicked aside. Silence. Lisa remained motionless, not in defiance but in respect, because she knew that the fury of a wounded man often came not from malice, but from unresolved pain, and she saw it in his eyes. But what no one saw was what was happening to her inside. There, in front of that man, with the boy scared and the joy shattered on the floor, Lisa felt small. She felt like an invader. She felt guilty for having brought light to a place where they just wanted to keep the curtains closed. She took a deep breath. He looked at Oliver, who was now trembling in silence. And he thought of his own daughter Clara back in Texas. She thought about how many times she was afraid to touch, to speak, to smile, for fear of making mistakes, for fear of being misunderstood, for fear of losing the little she had. And at that moment, an emptiness took over his chest. She followed in silence, carrying that weight that no one saw. And if you're following this story right now, feeling touched by all this, leave a like and subscribe. It is the most beautiful way to show that this pain has not gone unnoticed. Henry walked past her without looking her in the eye. He stopped in front of his son. He tried to speak, but Oliver was no longer reacting. The window was open, and the wind swayed the balloon forgotten in the chair. Lisa took a step back, then another, until he left the room. He didn't cry, but she felt that something inside her had been torn away. And as he climbed the stairs to put the bucket away, a question throbbed like muffled thunder. Had she crossed the line, or finally played where no one else dared to touch? The Charleston sky dawned covered in low clouds, and the smell of rain on the asphalt seemed to announce that this would not be an ordinary day. Lisa parked the old car a block from the mansion. In the passenger seat, a small suitcase, with his clothes folded in a hurry, the few hygiene products that remained, and the photo of his daughters in a cracked plastic picture frame. He had not slept well. Her head had been spinning in silence since the moment Henry had kicked her out of the room the previous afternoon. It was not necessary to hear the word "fired." His gaze already carried the sentence, and she knew how to recognize the moment to collect her heart and leave. He got out of the car with light steps, as if he didn't want to wake up the world. He arrived at the service gate at 6:02 a.m. as usual. He entered with his head down, uniform clean, face washed. But the eyes were swollen, and it wasn't just crying. It was one of shame, of impotence, of an early farewell. She walked to the laundry area, left her bag in the closet, and stood still, waiting for the housekeeper's thick voice to tell him that he could go upstairs to get his things. Or maybe not even that. Maybe just a sheet of paper in the brown envelope, like last time, when she was accused of smiling too much at her boss's brother. But no one came. 7 in the morning, 7:30. The intercom rang, calling her to the kitchen. His stomach tightened. He walked there with cautious steps, feeling every heartbeat as if it were an announcement of a sentence. In the kitchen, the silence of the team spoke more than words. The cook avoided his gaze. The gardener didn't even raise his head. The butler made a discreet gesture with his hand. "You want to talk to you? In the library?" Lisa took a deep breath. He wiped his hands on the hem of his uniform, and it did. Henry was standing by the bookshelf, dress shirt without a tie, folded sleeves, coffee still steaming in the mug. He didn't look furious, but he didn't seem calm either. The serious face, the red eyes from a bad night's sleep. She went into silence. He turned just enough to face her. "I didn't think I would come," he said. Lisa swallowed. "I came just to say goodbye properly." He frowned, as if he hadn't waited for that answer. "I'm not going to fire you." She did not answer, not out of relief, but out of confusion. What happened yesterday? It shouldn't have happened. His voice trembled in a restrained way, as if every word weighed heavily. "But I saw my son laugh, Lisa. Do you have any idea what that means?" She nodded slowly. He smiled. "For the first time since I buried his mother." Henry turned his face. He took a deep breath. "But there are rules in this house, And the rule is now clear. You keep going, but without contact with him. None, not even a glance. Do you understand? Lisa felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The air was out for a moment, but he answered with his head. Yes, she understood. I had no choice. The following days were heavy as lead. Lisa cleaned the house quietly, deviating from Oliver's schedule. If she saw him from afar, she lowered her eyes. If he heard his chair creaking down the hallway, he would enter the nearest room and close the door. The song was kept. The speaker is gone. The dances are over. But what didn't end? It was the void. Oliver stopped eating. He refused the spoon in his mouth, pushed the plate with his soft fingers. The nurses began to record weight loss. The dark circles under her eyes returned. The eyes, which for a brief moment had lit up, were once again deep pits of darkness. Every day, the boy spoke less with his eyes, with his body, with everything. Progress, which had never been much, was now regressing. He went back to wetting the bed. Twice in the same week. He refused the therapists. He even screamed when they tried to touch his hands. The hands that, until the other day, swayed to the rhythm of a forgotten song. Lisa heard everything in the hallways. She felt the house heavier, as if the grief had decided to return with even more force. One morning, as he was climbing the stairs with the bucket of cleaning supplies, he caught a glimpse of Henry sitting at the foot of his son's bed, head down, hands on face, not knowing what to do. She passed him as usual, invisible, but something inside the boss had changed, because for the first time in a long time, Henry wondered if he had made a mistake. And this mistake, it was costing the only spark of life that the sun had shown in 2 years. But what would he do about it? It was something that he didn't even know yet, and what Lisa was yet to discover could change everything she thought she knew about that place. The rain descended in thick veil over the stained glass windows of the Whitmore mansion, distorting the streetlights as if the outside world was crying along. It was late night, and the house was silent. True silence, one of those that don't even have wind. Henry was in the office, his tie lying on the table, his sleeves rolled up, and his glass of whiskey resting next to his laptop. The tired face, the red eyes, not sleep, by heart. With one click, he opened a forgotten folder on the computer. Old videos, recorded in the time when life still made sense. There was Oliver, aged 4, lying on the lawn in the garden, laughing as his mother tickled him. The blonde woman, with lively eyes and a sweet voice. She danced, sang, made a small airplane with her arms. The boy laughed as if he did not know fear. In another video, the three of them on a trip to Savannah. The little one with ice cream running down his fingers, the father taking pictures, the mother wiping with napkins, laughing loudly. Henry pressed play again, and one more, until the sound of Oliver's laughter mingles with the crackling of the ice in the glass. And then, without warning, the crying came, not like a hiccup, but as a breakup. He bent over in his chair, his hands clenching his face, because no one sees the man who cries when he is alone. But there, in that room, a millionaire collapsed like a lost boy. The next morning, Lisa arrived early as usual, the uniform clean, the steps light, but his eyes are still tired. Oliver followed in his shadowy silence. The house, increasingly heavy, but something had changed. Henry noticed now. He watched. In the kitchen, he saw how she folded the cloths carefully, as if each one had a name. He noticed how she arranged the children's books on the corner shelf, even though no one was reading. He noticed that she was passing the cloth on the arms of the sofa as if caressing. And when he found Oliver's toys scattered around the room anyway, he didn't throw them in a box. He arranged them as if it were an altar. That morning, surprising everyone, Henry appeared in the kitchen pantry and spoke in the lowest voice he had used in years. "Lisa, can you sit with me for a minute?" She hesitated. He thought it was some new warning, a disguised rebuke, but he nodded. He sat slowly in the chair at the end of the table. He served coffee to both of them. "Do you never sit down with anyone to eat?" he asked. She smiled sideways, humbly. "Those who clean usually eat standing up." Henry was silent. He took a sip of his coffee and, without looking directly at her, said, "I saw you yesterday arranging his toys. Do you do this every day?" Lisa thought. Then he replied quietly, "Whenever I see a toy out of place, I think that maybe, if he looks at it and remembers something good, he can smile again." Henry looked up. For the first time he faced Lisa without a filter. No social class, no uniform. "Do you have children?" She nodded, swallowing her emotion. "2 girls. They're in Texas with my mother. One of them, he was born with cerebral palsy." Henry blinked as if something inside him had clicked. "So, you understand?" Lisa did not immediately respond. He just lowered his eyes, touched the cup with his fingertips and said, "I understand the silence of a son, and I understand the despair of a father who no longer knows how to reach it." That sentence remained in the air, like a rope stretched between the two, something invisible but firm. The barrier between boss and maid was beginning to crack. It is at this point in history that many people wonder, can pain unite 2 very different worlds? And if you've come this far feeling something strange in your chest, trust me, you haven't seen what this story has in store. What's about to happen changes everything. That afternoon, Henry walked through the halls and saw Oliver motionless in his chair, his eyes fixed on one of the closed windows. But next to him, there was one of the toys arranged by Lisa, a small, colorful drum, and that alone was enough for him to stop for a second in which he thought, what if? Later, he called the housekeeper and asked about Lisa's background. She found out that she was legal, that she came from a small town in South Texas, which lost her husband at the border crossing, and that she had already been fired from 2 posts for too much empathy. That night, Henry did not drink. He didn't cry. He just sat there in the office, staring at the bookcase where there was now an old picture frame, same photo as before, the wife, the son, and a memory that stubbornly hurt. And it was there, in that moment of inner silence, that a new decision began to be born within him. But what was he about to propose would demand something from Lisa that she didn't know if she would have the courage to accept. The morning arrived with clear skies and a light wind that shook the curtains of the living room as if it were a breath of fresh start. The Whitmore mansion looked less grey, less closed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for those who live within silences, any change becomes an announcement. Lisa arranged the books on the shelf, lining the spines as if taking care of sleeping children. She was more serene, although fear still lived hidden deep in her chest. The day before, Henry had spoken to her little, but with a different firmness. "You can get back to playing your songs, Lisa, but only at certain times. No exaggeration." She just thanked her with moist eyes. It wasn't total permission, but it was already much more than I expected. That morning, he waited for the clock to strike 10 a.m. sharp. He took the speaker from the cabinet, wiped it with the cloth, and walked to the living room with almost ceremonial care. He pressed the play button. The same old salsa began to play, enveloping, soft, like a memory that comes back with smell and color. The sound filled the corners of the mansion like childhood perfume. Lisa didn't dance right away. He continued cleaning the coffee table, as if he were just letting the music exist. And then she listened. A soft creak, rubbers on the marble. He turned his face slowly and saw him, Oliver, appearing in the hallway, pushing the chair with effort, alone as never before. His eyes were alive, not fully awake but lit. They were looking for something, someone. They were looking for her. Lisa smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need a tooth or a sound, a smile that speaks directly to the soul. He said nothing. He just spun the cloth in the air, as he did before, and took a slight step in rhythm with the music. Oliver stopped, looked. He moved his shoulders, one side, then the other. The hands floated in the air, seeking movement. His whole body seemed to remember the joy of laughter, of life. Lisa danced softly, respectfully, as if she were asking the universe for permission to return that boy to the world. It was a dance without an audience, but full of truth. And it was then that from the top of the stairs Henry emerged, mug of coffee in hand, shirt half open, eyes marked by nights of guilt. He stopped, surprised to see his son dancing with his arms. Time seemed to stop. Steam rose from the cup, hot, moist. And in an involuntary movement, the mug slipped from his hand and fell to the ground with a dry crack. The coffee spread across the marble like paint, like blood, like a fright. Lisa turned her face away in fright, thinking she had crossed the line once again. Her body froze. But Henry, teary-eyed, raised one hand and made a simple, unexpected gesture. "Keep going." She didn't understand right away. He nodded, a silent but powerful confirmation. It was as if he said, "I see. I allow it. I need that too." And she continued. He spun lightly, stretching his arm to Oliver's hand, who laughed. A laugh that filled the high ceiling of the mansion with something that no money could ever buy. Hope. That scene, at that moment, was like a living painting of healing. A broken man, a lost boy, an invisible woman, connected by something as simple and as strong as a song. And at this point, I need to stop for a second and ask, have you ever experienced something like this? An instant when all seemed lost, and even so, a light appeared. If this story has already touched your heart, write it down below. He says to me, "I understand. I've been through this. I got emotional. Sometimes we just need someone who sees our pain, so it hurts less." Henry descended the last few steps slowly. He sat on the arm of the sofa without interrupting. I just watched, as if he wanted to keep that image forever. And there, in the face of all that, something inside him began to transform. It wasn't just about the son, it was about him too, about the man who had buried himself with his wife. When the song ended, Oliver raised his arms as if asking for more. Lisa looked at Henry. He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, in that house, someone said yes to what life could still offer. But Lisa, as she turned to get another song, saw something in the hallway, a shadow, someone who watched from afar, a hard, skewed look. It wasn't Henry. She was not a caregiver. It was not security, and this shadow seemed to hold secrets that neither of them was prepared to hear. The next few days at the Whitmore mansion seemed to belong to another world, one where pain was not forgotten, but transformed. Lisa continued to arrive at 6 o'clock, in the same simple uniform, the same bun fastened with cheap barrettes, but what she brought now didn't fit in a bag. She brought color. Color where before there was only stone. In the main room, the Persian carpet had become an enchanted kingdom. The vacuum cleaner, with the glued plastic eyes she had improvised, was now Sir Rufus, the dragon with a hiccup. Whee! The broom, with a ribbon of pink fabric attached to the handle, was Lady Vasurilda, warrior princess of the kingdom of Polania. Oliver, more and more present, entered the fantasy as if he had been born from it. He moved his arms to guide the dragon, turned his chair to the sound of the improvised fanfares that came out of the sound box. Lisa invented voices, made effects with her mouth, told stories with such dedication that even the furniture seemed to stop to listen. It was in the morning, while he was cleaning, that the magical worlds appeared. In the afternoon, the songs returned. But now, more than dancing, they were guided movements. She found a way to call it the King's Exercise, and Oliver obeyed like a gentleman. Henry watched, at first by far, then approaching carefully. One day, during the story of the battle between the dragon and the dust of the Tower of Lamentations, the closet of old books, he appeared with a cloth in his hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Can I be Sir Rufus's squire?" Oliver laughed so hard that he almost slipped out of his chair. Lisa froze for a second, surprised, but he just nodded with a smile that hid the commotion. And so, Henry entered the kingdom. One day, as Oliver leaned over to reach for a fallen toy, his father held his hand. It was a simple gesture, but when Lisa looked, she saw that Henry was trembling. The touch was light, hesitant, as if still apologizing for so long of absence. And Oliver smiled. The housekeeper, Mrs. Madison, watched all this in silence. She was one of those women who hasn't changed their hair since 1974, who think that feelings should be folded like linen sheets. No wrinkles, no color. He had been there longer than anyone. She saw Henry get married. She saw Oliver born. She saw the tragedy that broke them. And now he saw, with thin, calculating eyes, what he called mixing. In the hallway, standing behind the half-open door, she heard the laughter. He watched Lisa improvise a paper crown with a napkin and put it on Oliver's head. He watched Henry kneel down and be named Sir Café au Latte by his own son. But Madison didn't laugh. Don't smile. I didn't think it was pretty. I thought it was dangerous. One afternoon, as Lisa came down with the bucket and cleaning supplies, she crossed paths with Madison on the service stairs. The old woman watched her with a still gaze, without blinking. "You're feeling too close to the family, aren't you, Thompson?" Lisa stopped. Her heart beat faster, but she replied calmly, "I'm just cleaning up the dust, Mrs. Madison." "Well, clean up just that, and remember what your place is." Lisa swallowed. The housekeeper moved away slowly, like a shadow that preferred dark corners. But even with this cold backstage, Oliver's transformation was visible. He started to eat without help. He tried to brush his teeth on his own again. He slept better. One night, when Lisa went in to collect the bedding, she found a handmade drawing on the nightstand. It was her, with a broom in her hand and a crown on her head, smiling next to a dragon. She took that drawing with her, folded carefully, and kept it inside the Bible that she always carried in her purse. The house, inside, breathed differently. Even the paintings seemed less serious. Even the flowers in the vases lasted longer. The music, the laughter, and the story had brought something that no money had been able to give back. Life, but too much life, in the eyes of those who only know order and silence, can seem out of control. And what Lisa didn't know was that Madison was already moving beyond the crooked looks. She was whispering to other employees, reviewing security cameras in the main room, asking about Lisa in the neighborhoods, and even discreetly calling an old number in Nova Laredo, where someone answered with the cold voice of an unresolved past. Because behind every cleaning, behind every dance, there is always a secret that no one has told yet. And I was about to use it as a weapon. The morning breeze in Charleston blew gently, bringing with it the sweet smell of the magnolias that bloomed at the entrance of the Whitmore mansion. But inside the house, the atmosphere was different. Although Oliver's laughter still echoed in the halls, there was something different in the air, something colder, more subtle. Lisa felt it in the way the doors took longer to open when she knocked. In the eyes of the oldest employees, those who had previously only ignored her, now whispered behind her back. He felt it in the coffee left on the counter, still hot, but with the spoon turned out of the cup. Small details, small aggressions disguised as routine. And at the center of it all she was, Mrs. Elizabeth Madison. Housekeeper of the house for more than 2 decades, Madison's face did not change over time, always serious, always stiff, and her white hair tied in a bun as tight as her opinions. Her slurred southern accent gave an air of authority when she spoke. But it was in silence that Madison planted her seeds. That morning, Lisa was cleaning the windows of the library when she heard firm footsteps behind her. He didn't have to turn around to find out who he was. "Books don't like music, Thompson," Madison said dryly without raising her voice. "This is a place of concentration, not a children's party." Lisa smiled slightly, not abandoning the delicate gesture of the cloth on the glass. "I was just singing softly for Oliver. The boy doesn't need distraction. It needs discipline." She got closer. "You know, not all affection is innocent. There are people who use a smile as bait." Lisa stopped. He stared for a second at Madison's reflection in the glass, the cold, impassive eyes. But he said nothing. He kept cleaning, even with his hands shaking. Over the next few days, Henry began to look farther away. He continued to appear during the stories, smiling in the corner when he saw Oliver immersed in the adventures of the vacuum cleaner kingdom, but he no longer sat on the couch, nor did he improvise voices. When Lisa spoke to him, He would respond briefly, almost automatically. She felt that something was undermining what they had begun to build. In the pantry, he accidentally heard the new maid speaking softly to the cook. "I heard the cleaning lady is trying to hook the boss." Imagine, from the floor cloth to the diamond ring. The cook laughed, not knowing that Lisa was listening. She walked away slowly, taking the bucket and her heart tight. The worst was on Wednesday, when Henry asked to talk to her on the back porch. It was late afternoon, the orange sky reflected in the windows. He had his hands in his pockets, his expression tense. "Lisa, you know I trust what you've done here with Oliver. He has improved a lot, but some people on the team have raised concerns." Lisa widened her eyes but remained silent. "Mrs. Madison thinks that perhaps his presence is creating a emotional dependence, which may not be healthy." That sentence cut deeper than any dismissal, because she knew what was really being said. "You're moving from your place." "I just want to help," she said, her voice low but firm. "And if my presence is hindering more than helping, I can—" Henry raised his hand, interrupting it. "No, that's not it. I'm trying to understand what's best for my son." Lisa nodded. He took a step back, as if retreating from the edge of an abyss. That night he collected the toys more carefully than usual. He folded the cloths as if each one had feelings. And sitting in the small chair in the locker room, she took Oliver's drawing, the one where she was a princess with a broom, and held it to her chest. The crumpled paper absorbed her tears in silence. "If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Because sometimes all we need is to be seen by someone. Is that it? Visa and respected." While the house slept, Madison walked the halls with silent steps. He stopped in front of Oliver's room. He heard the whispers between the boy and Lisa, who said goodbye with affection. The housekeeper's face hardened even more. She returned to her quarters, where a small box of documents awaited her. Inside, a copy of Lisa's old immigration process, a Mexican newspaper clipping about her husband's disappearance, and a phone number scrawled in red with 3 letters above: ICE. Because sometimes the real danger doesn't come from screaming, but of poisonous silences. And Madison, I was about to make a move that would put everything at risk. It was a cloudy morning, one of those in which the sky seems to carry secrets along with the clouds. Lisa arrived at the mansion as usual, punctual, discreet, with her eyes downcast and her soul tightened. Since the conversation with Henry, something in his chest had not found peace. There was a different silence in the corridors, as if the walls had heard too much. Soon after cleaning the piano in the living room, Lisa went to the large sofa, the same one where, days ago, Oliver had crowned his father as Sir Café Con Late. She pushed the armchair away and, without waiting, found something under the carpet, a small, dark blue velvet case. As he opened it, his heart stopped for a second. Inside rested an old watch with a leather strap and a gold dial, the kind of piece that carries more than hours. Before she could call anyone, Mrs. Madison's cold voice cut through the air. "Well, well, what a surprise. Mrs. Whitmore's watch, missing for more than a year." Lisa widened her eyes. I just found it. I was going to deliver." "Of course I would," Madison replied with venom running down her words. "As always, the honest cleaning lady shows up at just the right moment. How convenient." That scene attracted attention. 2 nurses whispered in the corner. The maid looked suspiciously. Lisa felt the ground crumbling beneath her feet. Minutes later, she was called to Henry's office. He was standing, arms crossed, expression closed. The clock was on the table, next to a blank sheet of paper and a pen. "Lisa, this watch belonged to my wife. Madison says she found him with you. I swear, I found it under the couch. I was going to deliver." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I want to believe you." He ran his hand over his face, tired. "But I need to better understand what is happening. Until then, I think you'd better stay away. For a while." She felt the world fall. Am I being fired?" "No, Only away. No salary, unfortunately. Only until everything is cleared up. Lisa did not answer. He didn't cry there. She just nodded, took her things and left with the same silence that defined her. But inside, something broke. At the gate of the mansion, holding the handle of the bag tightly, the tears came. A contained, silent cry, like that of someone who has been beaten by the world many times and learned to bleed inside. In the living room, Oliver waited. When he realized that Lisa wouldn't be coming back from lunch, he started screaming. He hit the wheels of his chair. He kicked the ground. He tried to get up on his own, lost his balance, and fell with everything. A dry crack, a sharp scream, blood on his lip and despair in his eyes. Henry ran to him. He held the boy in his arms, but Oliver pushed him, screamed, cried like a wounded animal. "Where is she?" he stammered, for the first time with words since the accident. "Where's Lisa?" Henry froze. Hearing that childish voice breaking the silence of 2 years was like a stab in the chest, but the pain came along with guilt. It was at that time that he understood. Lisa was no distraction. It was not mixing. She was the link that reconnected her son to the world, and he had cut it with his bare hands. No, there are things that we only understand when it's late. But sometimes, if you listen to your heart very quietly, you have time to come back. And if this story is still touching you, if you got here feeling something in your chest, stay with me. Because what's next? It will change everything. Henry spent the night in his son's room, lying by the bed, holding his hand with trembling fingers. He apologized silently, looking at the ceiling as if begging forgiveness from the dead and the living at the same time. And in the guest room, as Madison wiped a tissue over dust-free furniture, the old phone rang. She answered. A voice on the other end said only, "The border contact has been found. Her name matches. Want to follow?" Madison did not immediately respond. She observed the reflection of herself in the mirror in the hall, the image of a woman who confused order with power. After a few seconds, he whispered, "Yes, want." And so, without anyone knowing, an anonymous complaint was sent. But what Madison didn't imagine was that that lie she had just sown carried a truth buried much longer. And when that truth comes out, neither she, nor Henry, nor Lisa will be prepared for what will be revealed. Night was falling heavy over Charleston, and the wind whistled through the cracks in the Whitmore mansion's windows, as if lamenting for someone. Oliver, now huddled in the corner of the room, refused food, avoided touch, kept his eyes glazed over nothingness. The music had ceased, the stories had died, the dragon was silent, the kingdom in ruins. The doctors came, diagnosed, prescribed. The nurses tried everything, but he refused even the drawings he once loved. A cold silence had once again occupied all the spaces, a silence crueler than any scream. Henry, leaning against the doorway, watched his own son's slow deterioration. There was fear in his eyes, fear that he is losing Oliver again, not to death, but to a deeper darkness where no father can enter. He walked the halls at night like a ghost, his steps shuffling and his glass of whiskey intact in his hand. He no longer slept. He didn't eat properly. The voices that once advised him, the psychologists, the consultants, the officials, now only irritated him. In an especially silent dawn, a cry cut through the house. A high-pitched, desperate cry coming from Oliver's room. Henry ran. She entered the room and found the boy struggling in bed, his arms trembling, his eyes open as if he saw a waking nightmare. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling, trying to calm him down. "Oliver, son, what do you want? What can I do? Tell me." Henry's voice broke with each syllable. Oliver was crying, but between sobs his mouth moved, for the first time since the accident. A single word came out, choked, scratched, but clear. "Lisa." Henry stopped. Time has stopped. Everything around lost sound. That word was like the bursting of a dam that he had built himself. The tears came unchecked. He pulled his son into his lap, repeating her name like a mantra, like a cry for help that echoed through the empty corridors of his soul. He went to the office, staggering. He looked for the number among the papers. It was 3:14 a.m. when he called. On the other side, a sleepy, frail voice answered, "Hello? Lisa. It's me, Henry. Forgive me, I made a mistake. Very much." Silence. On the other end of the line, the sound of choking breath. He said his name. It was the first word, after all. Lisa cried silently, not out of pride, but for a pain that now turned into something she had never allowed herself to feel inside. Recognition. "I'll be there in the morning, if you still want to." Henry only replied, "He needs you." And so did I. The sun had barely touched the roof when Lisa walked through the gates. His uniform was clean, his bag was tight on his shoulder, and his heart was racing. At every step, he remembered the looks, the accusation, the humiliation. But I also remembered Oliver's laughter, the stories, the songs. She didn't come for Henry. He came for the boy, for the child who had saved her without knowing it. When he opened the door to the room, he saw the small body in the chair, facing the window. When Oliver heard the sound of the doorknob, he turned slowly. His eyes met hers, and in that second, his face collapsed in relief. He stretched out his arms. He shouted, still in a weak voice, "Lisa!" She ran up to him, knelt down and hugged him tightly. He was trembling, cried, but now of joy. Henry, standing on the stairs, watched in silence. There was no pride on his face. There was humility, for the first time, perhaps in his entire life. And in that silent embrace between a cleaning lady and an injured child, something was rebuilt. Something stronger than any luxury, more valuable than any jewel hidden under the rug. If you have come this far, it is because you believe that there are ties that not even injustice can break. And I tell you with an open heart, what comes next? It will show that behind the pain, there is a truth that changes everything. But in the library, behind the record shelf, an anonymous envelope was waiting to be opened. Inside, there were documents, old papers. It's a name. Because although hope had returned to that house, the shadow of a buried past was about to emerge. And this time, it would come with enough force to destroy everything again. The rain fell thinly on the rose garden, washing the leaves as if the sky also wanted to erase some dirt from the earth. Lisa, silent, pushed the cleaning cart with her eyes downcast. But inside, something had changed. Ever since she had returned to the mansion, she had felt that there was still something loose, an invisible end of the tie they had tried to cut between her and the boy. She was grateful to have returned, but her name was still tarnished. The accusation still hung in the air like a sour smell, even if no one dared to repeat it. Lisa knew she needed the truth, and not out of vanity, but out of dignity. It was on the second floor, while cleaning out Henry's old office, that she saw a metal box with handwritten labels. Security, 2020-2021. Most of the cameras in the house had been replaced by modern systems, but here were the old hard drives, files forgotten like sleeping ghosts. His heart raced. Between the dates, he recognized the exact day. It was the same day they found the watch under the sofa. He waited for everyone to sleep. In the evening, he went to the back area, where the gardener used to keep the tools. Mr. Dwight was an old man, with calloused hands and scant words, but there was something in his eyes that always made her feel safe. When Lisa told him about what she wanted to do, he didn't ask why. He just nodded and said, "Give me a few minutes." With an old key and a portable adapter, they connected the HD to the old monitor in the workshop. The image was grainy, the sound non-existent, but the camera captured the entire living room from the exact angle at which the sofa was positioned. Lisa advanced the video. Hours of cleaning, moving the team, everything seemed ordinary, until around 10:43 a.m., a figure appeared on the screen. Mrs. Madison. She entered alone. He stopped in front of the sofa. He looked to the sides. He took something out of his pocket, the blue velvet case. He bent down, calmly moved the rug away, and pushed the object under the furniture, with the precision of someone who does this not for the first time. Then she got up, smoothed her dress, and left the room as if she'd just checked the curtain. Lisa felt a heat rise up her back. The tears came effortlessly, but they were not of sadness. They were of justice, because for the first time she had the truth, and this time in pictures. The next morning, before he even started cleaning, he knocked on the door of Henry's office. He was concentrating on documents, but when he saw his face, he knew something was different. I need you to see something, Lisa said, placing the USB stick on the table. What's that? The truth, he replied without hesitation. Henry watched the video in silence. Every second his expression changed. First incredulity, then anger, finally shame. When the video ended, he stared at the screen for long seconds, as if he couldn't believe what he had just seen. Without saying a word, he stood up and asked for Madison to be called to the library. Lisa stood outside, but she could hear her voice trying to explain, distort, justify. I just wanted to protect the house, Mr. Whitmore. This woman was infiltrating. You planted a lie. Henry's voice was now firm, cutting. He accused someone innocent. He humiliated a woman who only brought light to this house. This is unforgivable. The door opened abruptly. Madison came out with a pale face and quickened steps, holding the bag to her chest as if it were armor. Lisa saw her pass. He said nothing. It was not necessary. Justice, when it comes from the truth, speaks for itself. In the hallway, Henry approached slowly. He stopped in front of Lisa, his eyes teary. I'm sorry for everything, for not having listened to you before, for having doubted. She nodded, not out of submission, but out of wisdom. I knew that certain apologies don't need words, only change. From that day on, the air in the house seemed lighter. Lisa no longer had to hide in the corners. The employees greeted her with respect. Oliver smiled more and even made up new stories for the Princess of the Broom. The music came back little by little. The dragon roared again. And for those who are still with us, watching all this, know that the truth may take time, but when it comes, it cleans everything like rain on a dirty roof. And what's next? It will show that even the most painful past can hide a revelation capable of changing everything. Because inside that same metal box of files, there was another video, older, and what Lisa didn't know yet is that in it, there was a clue to a secret that linked her to Oliver long before that cleaning began. The sun invaded the Whitmore mansion in a different way. It was no longer that indifferent glow that came through the windows unnoticed. Now, the lightning seemed to dance between the furniture, touch the walls with heat, and transform the air. The house breathed. After Madison left, an invisible change spread through every room, something you couldn't measure but you could feel. It was as if, finally, someone had opened the curtains after years in the dark. Henry made sure to gather the entire team around the main stairs. There were old servants, gardeners, cooks, drivers, and there, in front of everyone, he looked at Lisa, his eyes steady, but his heart exposed. Miss Lisa Thompson has been wrongly accused. And I, as the boss of this house, want to apologize publicly. The truth has been restored, and as of today, she has my full confidence. A respectful silence took over the environment. Lisa, her eyes moist, nodded silently. She didn't need clapping. That phrase was more than any recognition. It was a reparation. From that day on, the rules changed. Lisa was able to walk freely around the house. There were no more half-open doors or contained footsteps. She and Oliver resumed the routine of stories, songs, and dances, but now with more courage. The child flourished. He began to draw in more detail. A castle, a woman in a blue dress, a dragon with the face of a vacuum cleaner. He said new words, asked questions. One afternoon he asked to go to the park. Henry arranged everything in a hurry, as if he was afraid that the order would evaporate. Lisa went along. It was the first time in 2 years that Oliver's wheelchair had crossed the gates beyond the clinic. The wind on the boy's face, the leaves falling on his lap, the sound of the other children in the background. Everything was new, and Lisa noticed something in Henry's eyes that she had never seen. Gratitude, not the polite one who offers herself for convenience, but the deep one, which comes from those who had their souls saved and do not know how to repay. On the way back from the park, Oliver fell asleep in the car. Lisa and Henry were silent, but there was a peace in their silence, an understanding. The next day, he showed up with a project in hand. "I wanted to renovate Oliver's room," he said, without looking directly at her. "I thought maybe, could you help me with that? You know him more than anyone here." Lisa was surprised, but he accepted, and so the two began to work together. They chose colors, a soft green with light blue accents. New books were bought, new curtains. Henry had a bookcase built in the shape of a castle. Lisa sewed cushions in animal shapes. They laughed all afternoon when she chose a rug that looked like a football field, and Henry wrinkled his nose. "What's wrong?" she asked. "That rug. It's horrible." He replied seriously. "But it's his favorite," she said, crossing her arms. "Then it's decided," Henry said surrenderedly. "The room is his, not mine." As they hammered, painted, and chose details, something invisible was building between the two, a respect that went beyond the function, a discreet tenderness. With each gesture, with each word exchanged, a new complicity emerged. And Lisa, even without understanding it, felt that she was entering a territory where she never imagined being invited. One evening they sat on the kitchen porch. Henry poured 2 glasses of lemonade, and the two of them stared up at the sky. He spoke of childhood, from the pain of losing his wife, of guilt for having closed my heart. Lisa spoke of her daughter in Texas, of the longing that hurt like a dull knife, of the husband who disappeared at the border. It was as if, at last, the walls fell, as if both had understood that, even coming from such different worlds, pain brought them closer. And if you feel like you're living something that no one sees, it carries a force that the world has not yet recognized, continues here. Because what will still happen between these two hearts, it can change everything you believe about love, forgiveness, and destiny. And that same night, as Oliver slept in the new room, an old drawer in Henry's office blew open in the wind. Inside it, among forgotten papers, rested a letter. An envelope with a feminine, elegant, trembling handwriting, addressed to him and with a name in the sender that Henry hadn't read in years, the name of his late wife. And the first sentence of the letter was a whisper written in faded ink. "If you ever find this letter, know that the truth must be told." The phone rang shortly after 7 in the morning, just as Lisa finished hanging up the new curtains in Oliver's room. The number was from Texas. When he answered, the voice on the other end trembled. It was her mother. Clara, his daughter, had had a severe respiratory crisis. She was hospitalized for observation, and doctors still did not know the cause. Lisa felt her legs fail. The dish towel slipped out of his hand. His heart tightened as if someone had twisted him inside. That feeling of helplessness, of distance, of uncontrolled urgency, it all came back at once. Without thinking too much, she went to Henry, still in his pajamas on the porch, drinking coffee. Her eyes said more than any words. "It's my daughter. She's in the hospital, in Texas." Henry got up at the same time, no questions asked, without hesitation. "You're going there now. I take care of everything. Passage, transportation, whatever. You're going to stay with her, Lisa. She needs you." His generosity made the tears fall faster than she wanted. The gratitude I felt was not for money. It was because she was treated for the first time as someone who mattered, like a mother, like a human being. Hours later, Lisa boarded. There were 4 days of tension at the hospital in El Paso. Clara, lying on that white bed, too small for so many machines, held his hand as tightly as when she was a baby. But she survived. The fever subsided. The exams improved. And with each silent prayer Lisa prayed, she remembered Oliver's eyes and the feeling that only those who clean the corners of the world know, that even invisible, she supported everything. On the way back, the gate to the mansion opened slowly. Lisa came in carrying medicine and a small rag doll in her purse, which Clara insisted on sending to the boy who dances with Mommy. His heart was beating fast, of longing, of fear, of urgency. As she pushed the front door, the scene disarmed her. Oliver was lying on the couch, pale, sweating, his face turned to the window. Henry was kneeling next to him, trying to play with a dinosaur doll, but the boy did not react. When he saw Lisa, Oliver blinked slowly, and a tear flowed. "Mama Lisa," he whispered. It was the first time he had called her that, and it was as if the roof of the house had disappeared and the whole sky had descended into that embrace. Henry also approached, his eyes tired, his face haggard. "He doesn't sleep well. He hardly eats. He doesn't talk to anyone. The house, it was empty without you." She held his hand for a second. He said nothing, but in that touch there was everything: forgiveness, presence, and something that had not yet been named. Later, in the kitchen, while preparing a soup for Oliver, Henry appeared with 2 glasses of water and sat on the bench next to her. "How's your daughter?" "Improving, thank God. Doctors said it was lung inflammation. He's already at home with my mother." He nodded. "You shouldn't have gone through this alone. We learn to get strong when no one comes," she replied with a half-smile. "You're not alone anymore, Lisa." At that moment, when 2 very different people shared such similar silences, something was born. Not a forced romance, but a profound recognition of souls who have mutually saved each other. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it, because love can also be born from corners that the world ignores. And that same night, after Oliver finally fell asleep smiling, Lisa went upstairs to the guest room. There was a letter on the bed, a yellowed envelope. On top of it, a small note with Henry's handwriting. "I found this among my wife's papers. I think you need to read it." And what Lisa read there made the ground disappear from under his feet, because the truth hidden in those words went far beyond any coincidence. It was something that could change everything she thought about her past, her present, and even about the boy he now called son. The grass in the garden was damp from the morning dew, and the smell of lavender from the surrounding bushes seemed stronger that day. Henry had woken up early, personally supervising the preparation of everything. The towel spread out under the shade of the oldest tree on the property, the basket of artisan breads, fresh fruit, freshly squeezed orange juice. It wasn't the kind of thing a millionaire did, but that morning, he wasn't a millionaire. It was just a man trying to say, "Thank you." Lisa arrived with Oliver on her lap, wrapped in a blue blanket, still sleepy. When he saw the scene, he stopped for a moment. The wind shook the branches gently, as if even time was cooperating with that moment. Henry walked up to her, and without saying anything, picked up the boy carefully and placed him on the towel. Lisa sat next to her. He was without his uniform. He wore a simple white blouse, jeans, and a restrained smile. The eyes, however, delivered a whirlwind. The picnic was quiet. They talked about the garden, about a stubborn squirrel that stole nuts from the kitchen. Oliver laughed. He played with an apple as if it were a ball. It was the first time they were there, the 3 of them, without the weight of the roles that the world insisted on assigning. Boss, maid, patient. They were just people. After a while, Henry took a small wooden box out of his coat pocket. He handed it to Lisa with firm hands, but his eyes moved. "This here. It was a gift I bought for my wife on our last birthday. I never managed to deliver." He paused. "I kept this box for years, and now I think I understand who it really belongs to." Lisa opened slowly. Inside was a white linen handkerchief with finely hand-embroidered edges. In the corner, in soft letters, it read, "Grace." It was the name of Henry's wife, but next to it, embroidered more recently, was another name, Lisa. She widened her eyes. He looked at Henry, then at the handkerchief, then at Oliver. The boy, not understanding exactly what was happening, held her hand tightly and leaned his head against her shoulder. "Lisa," Henry said, his voice breaking, "this house has been dark for years. Silent. I tried to fill it with money, with doctors, with distractions. But it was you who brought life back to this place. You brought my son back to me." She couldn't speak. She just looked at him with suppressed tears. "I wanted to ask you a question, and I want you to think calmly, but would you accept to live here with us? Not as an employee, but as part of the family?" Lisa put her hand to her mouth. The tears now fell freely. She looked at the garden, at the sky, at the boy who slept leaning against her. It was as if her whole life, every pain, every fall, every silent struggle, had brought her to that very moment. Because sometimes life takes such long turns just to put us exactly where our heart should have been from the beginning. If you believe that, stay with us, because what's about to happen, it is stronger than any dream. She did not respond at the time. He just pressed his handkerchief to his chest and closed his eyes. But in that silence, there was an answer. And there was also a new beginning. What Lisa didn't know, what no one there could have predicted, was that this new beginning would be accompanied by a revelation that had been kept for years, something buried in Grace's past, which would come back with force, transforming not only Lisa's life, but the fate of the entire Whitmore family. Lisa spent that night with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling of the small guest room that over time had become a refuge. The house slept quietly, and even the branches of the garden seemed more still than usual. On the nightstand next to the bed, the handkerchief embroidered with two names, Grace and Lisa, rested as a silent symbol of all that had changed. She couldn't sleep. Henry's invitation swirled in her head like a whirlwind, not as an employee, but as part of the family. These words, sweet to any ear, had double weight in his heart. Being part of a family has always been a dream, but what if, in order to do so, she had to give up the one thing that was never taken away from her? Your own identity. He got up slowly, walked to the window, and looked up at the sky. There was a single star shining over Charleston that night. An old memory came to mind, her husband in Mexico saying that stars were paths for those who felt lost. She sighed, closed her eyes, and thought of Clara. He took out his cell phone hesitantly and called. The call fell straight into her daughter's sweet little voice. "Mom, are you with the boy who dances?" Lisa smiled, even with a tight throat. "Yes, I am, my flower. He's sleeping now. Are you sad?" "A little bit." Mom has to make a difficult decision. On the other end of the line, there was a silence, and then an unexpectedly mature response. "Mom, sometimes God sends people who change our history, but we have to let it." Lisa put her hand to her chest. The tears came strongly, silently, warmly. She closed her eyes, pressed her phone to her face and whispered, "Thank you, my love." The next morning the sun seemed more golden. Lisa walked down the stairs with a firm step, still in the simple uniform she always wore, but something about her face had changed. She found Henry on the porch, reading the newspaper, and Oliver next door, playing with building blocks. She approached unceremoniously, sat down in front of him, and in a calm and clear voice said, "I accept." Henry looked up in surprise. "Do you accept? Not to be your wife? Not to be a nanny, not to be a shadow of anyone, but I accept to be part of this house, not to forget who I am, but to help you remember who you can be." Henry dropped the newspaper on his lap. Intense, almost shy relief came across his face. "We can go slowly, no rush, without naming what doesn't need to be named yet." Lisa nodded. That was enough. And so, a new routine began. Not marked by signed papers, rings, or empty promises, but by small gestures. Lisa went on to have coffee with Henry in the garden. Oliver called her Mama Lisa, naturally. The three of them walked around the neighborhood together, with the boy in the chair decorated with ribbons and toys. The neighbors peeked through the windows, murmured, but Lisa didn't care. For the first time, he felt not ashamed of his place. The house was transformed with them. The rooms have been redecorated. The old maid's room became a library. The previously cold walls received drawings by Oliver, and with each corner that Lisa cleaned, it also seemed to purify an old piece of that pain that lived there. She still sent money to her mother in Texas, still talked to Clara every night. She never stopped remembering where she came from, or the days when she cleaned the floor and was ignored by everyone. But now it was different. The hands that cleaned were also hands that cared, that they created, that they rebuilt. And if you've made it this far, you may also believe that you don't need to have the same blood to build a family. Sometimes all we need is respect, courage, and someone who sees beyond the uniform. But there was something Lisa still didn't understand, a silence that insisted on remaining inside the box where he found that handkerchief. Because there, next to the embroidery, there was an old paper, an almost forgotten letter signed by Grace Whitmore. And what she wrote, and for whom she wrote, could change everything. After all, what if Lisa and that house were connected by a bond much older than anyone imagined? 6 months have passed, like a breath of warm breeze through the trees in late spring. The Whitmore mansion, once silent and stately as a mausoleum of sad memories, now breathed lightness. The windows were open, the curtains danced with the wind, and the aroma of freshly baked cake wafted through the hallways like an invitation to life. Outside, the entire garden had been transformed. Colorful balloons floated attached to the centuries-old trees. Ribbons shone in the sun like enchanted streamers, and a small white tent housed a 3-tier cake decorated with stars and a rocket on top. It was Oliver's 8th birthday, and for the first time since the accident, he was smiling with every muscle in his face. The wheelchair had been transformed with Lisa's help. Laminated paper simulating thrusters, planet stickers, flashing lights on the rim of the wheels. Oliver was no longer the invisible boy of the mansion. He was the captain of a rocket, the hero of his own story. Friends from school were there, colleagues from the neighborhood, nurses who took care of him. Even the employees of the house brought simple gifts, but wrapped in sincere ties. But everyone knew that that party only existed because of one person, the cleaning lady who danced with the bucket in her hand. The woman who saw life where there was only silence. Lisa wore a floral dress she had received from Henry days earlier. It was simple, but it gained strength, her hair tied up carefully, a golden earring inherited from her grandmother on her earlobe. She was not at the center of the party, but all eyes were on her, because it was impossible not to see love overflowing in the small gestures. When he adjusted Oliver's cap, when he picked up a napkin gently, when he laughed softly at the children's jokes. Henry watched from afar, leaning against the porch, a glass of lemonade in his hand, and his heart beating at a pace he hadn't felt in a long time. When the music stopped and everyone approached the cake, a small improvised stage was set up on the deck. It was the moment of congratulations. Oliver insisted on going up there. 2 friends helped him with the wheels. Lisa stood to the side, and then he asked for the microphone. A respectful silence spread. Even the birds seemed to have stopped to listen. His voice still frail but clear as a sunny morning, Oliver said, "Today is my birthday. And I'm very happy because it's the first one I really remember." The children applauded. Some adults smiled, but he didn't finish. "I want to thank you, to my father, for taking care of me." Henry swallowed, nodded with teary eyes. "But I want to thank her much more." He turned his face slowly, holding the microphone tightly. "To Mom Lisa." A shiver ran through the guests. Lisa put her hands to her mouth in surprise as Oliver continued. "She was the one who taught me how to dance," smiling. "To live again. I love you, Mama Lisa." The applause that followed was not loud. It was profound. The kind that carries respect, admiration, reverence. Some guests cried without disguising it. Henry walked up to them, and when he reached the stage, hugged his son tightly. Then he held out his hand to Lisa. She hesitated for a second, but then accepted. And there, in front of everyone, he looked at her as if he recognized something sacred. "You didn't just save him," he said quietly. "You saved me too." Lisa squinted, trying to contain her excitement. She never sought recognition, not out of vanity. I just wanted to be seen as someone who felt, who donated, who existed beyond the uniform. And in that moment, with that boy saying, "Mommy," she felt like she had been touched by something bigger. The rest of the party went on lightly. Children ran around, soft music played in the background, waiters served cupcakes and lemonade. But something in the air had changed. That house, once so full of silence, now breathed love. With every laugh from Oliver, every light step from Lisa, every look from Henry, a new page was written. And as if the universe wanted to seal that instant, an envelope fell discreetly from the gift box. Henry picked it up and read the sender with a frown. It was the handwriting of his deceased wife, Grace. Lisa saw the paper in her hands and froze. Henry, not understanding, opened the envelope right there. What she had written inside was something that neither time nor grief nor even Lisa's faith could have predicted, because that letter kept a secret that involved Lisa, a secret that perhaps explained why it had all started, and that would change, once again, everyone's destiny. After all, what did Grace know about Lisa before she even crossed those gates? The afternoon breeze pierced the white curtains of the Whitmore mansion like a whisper of peace. In the garden, Oliver's laughter mingled with the sound of leaves, and on the living room floor there were scattered toys, colorful drawings, and small footprints of dried paint, signs of a house that had finally pulsed again. On the porch, Lisa read in silence, barefoot and serene. There was no luxury in his chair or refinement in the surrounding furniture, but everything there exuded dignity. Henry, on his knees next to his son, was trying to put together a difficult puzzle. The two laughed together at their mistakes, and Lisa watched with full but tranquil eyes. She thought about everything she faced, the crooked looks, the silent humiliations, the fear of being torn away as she had been so many times. And yet, it was there. Not because he begged, but because his presence was necessary. She touched her face, feeling the sun warm her skin, and whispered to herself, "When I came here, I just wanted to work. I didn't know it would be part of a cure, nor that one day someone would call me Mom again." Lisa's story wasn't magical, it was human, and that's what makes it so powerful, because what healed that house was not the money, nor the titles, but the courage of a woman who danced with a bucket in her hand and a past on her shoulders. A woman who dared to believe that kindness could also be revolution. If this story touched you, maybe it's because, deep down, we all carry something of Lisa, or have already met someone like that along the way. And if you felt that, I thank you for staying this far. His presence makes this narrative make sense. Your like is like a hug that warms up and supports this channel, and your subscription is an invitation to come back whenever you want, for another coffee, another story, another piece of shared humanity. Tell me here in the comments which city you watched. Let's build this community of people who feel, who listen, and who respect. And it activates the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Because, yes, there are many other stories like Lisa's, simple, invisible women who carry the gift of healing without fanfare. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.